Welcome back to Vault 9, everybody. My name is Jeff, and today we're talking about diversity of thought, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Let's start with surface level diversity, which is what most politicians and institutions cling to like gospel. Let's start with what we've constantly been shown here. You turn on any corporate video, you turn on read any university's website, sit in on any mandatory HR onboarding, the message is all the same. We value diversity. And then comes the parade, the diversity of race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, ability. The optics are fully curated and the message is polished, and it's all the same. The institutions behind it want you to know they're all inclusive. But the question comes, inclusive of what? Because here's what no one talks about, and here's what nobody will say out loud. All of this is surface level identity bullshit. And that surface level diversity masks an ideological monoculture underneath. These people might look different, but they're all trained to think and say the same thing. And you see it everywhere. University brochures, they're the color of the rainbow. You got every member of a race throughout their brochures. You've got obvious visual sexuality of certain people on display. And they boast about how many international students they have, how many female engineering graduates that they're producing. And corporations show off boardroom photos filled with every color, gender, expression. They tick every single box, and media outlets trot out panels with token representation, but they rarely ever attempt any actual intellectual conflict. So that's diversity, but it's not real diversity. It's just surface level window dressing. The unspoken truth is this: identity doesn't guarantee any difference. And difference in skin color, difference in speech, accent, or pronouns is not the same thing as having diversity difference in worldview. And yet institutions seem perfectly content with their diversity of identity as long as no one brings up the elephant in the room, which is diversity of thought. And to me, that's the missing piece. Let's get on to what's missing, because this is at the crux of it. True diversity, in my opinion, the kind that drives real innovation, progress, and democracy, and sparks conversation and brings people to middle ground, is diversity of thought. Because that's true. And everybody, you can't deny this. Not everybody is thinking the same thing in different bodies. Not everybody repeating the same slogans in different accents, and not everyone nodding along to the same ideas out of the fear of being labeled. Real diversity means people who can fundamentally disagree with each other, sitting at the same table and having the guts to hash it out without fear of a penalty. And that's the kind of diversity that all institutions actively avoid. For example, try expressing a viewpoint that goes against the current orthodoxy on gender, on race, on climate, on immigration, on back to COVID, on national identity, Palestine. Watch what happens. You're not going to be debated. You're not going to be engaged with. You're not going to be heard. You're going to be labeled. You're going to be shamed, suspended, fired, canceled, and not told, I don't agree with you, or I think you're wrong. You're going to be told, your way of thinking is dangerous. And that's the narrative that we're now in. It's that new phase where disagreement isn't disagreement anymore. It's now harm, it is violence, and it's hate speech. And they feel that they can just shut off any conversation when they can no longer defend or debate their point, and just slap a label on anyone they want to disagree with. Which is intellectual cowardice disguised as morality. What they actually are saying is we want diversity, but only the kind that we can control, and only the ones that agree with us. And if you threaten that status quo with facts, logic, compassion, empathy, whatever, you're cast as a problem, and nobody pays attention to what you're saying. Because when diversity becomes a marketing strategy, thinking differently becomes a liability. Okay? And let's break down how this has been playing out across the institutions, starting with academia, universities, and schools. Once used to be Universities used to be, the nucleus of free thinking and the marketplace of ideas, and now it is a fortress of ideological purity. Conservative or contrarian professors, they don't exist. They're nowhere in these institutions, and they've not been taken away for misconduct, but because of wrongthink, I guess we can call it. Guest speakers get shouted down or blocked before they even arrive. Student activists demand safe spaces, not from violence, but from opposing views. And universities are no longer in the business of education. And I'll say this buzzword, they're in the business of indoctrination. Because you cannot claim to champion diversity when your curriculum reads like a manifesto and your hiring process filters out intellectual dissent or difference of opinion. The media love to pretend they offer balance as well, but that is obviously bullshit, because you'll see all of these panels, if they even bring in an opposing voice, they'll bring in one opposing voice just to say they did, and they'll carefully select the one conservative who won't rock the boat too much, or they'll just cut to commercial or cut them off the moment the guest starts to make a real point. And we've seen this. Look at any news channel. We're seeing it right now. For example, I'll throw this in where we're looking at the recent shutdown of the United States government. And one of the big sticking points is funding for illegals. And Democrats are swearing up and down they've never advocated for handing out medical insurance for illegal aliens. And then, as conservatives on panels or anywhere else bring up actual footage or quote Democrats that actually went and said this, and it's all on tape, it happened, you'll see the panel or the networks shift and silence or cut. They don't let that get proven. And it's blatant. It's blatant censorship, and they cut that out once the guest makes a real point. And you're going to see 10-to-1 panel ratios, all agreeing with each other, patting themselves on the back for being brave and righteous, while swimming in total consensus without a single shred of opposing viewpoint coming at them. So again, most media institutions don't want a diversity of opinion. We've got a journalist who left the CBC for pointing this out. He said, I'm not allowed to have an opinion. He has an excellent podcast on Spotify called Can't Be Censored. Wonderful, wonderful point of view. This is a very smart, educated podcast that we're hearing. I encourage you to check it out. And he was blatantly insane. They want a diversity of presentation. They want people who look different, but all saying the same thing. Which, brings us into the corporate culture, where this is more transparent than anywhere. DEI is now a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it operates now basically as a safety net or a filter, not for competence, but for compliance. Say the right things, display the right hashtags, put pronouns in your bio, attend the right training sessions, smile and nod, and you're good. Question any of it, you are now a threat to corporate culture. HR departments claim to promote inclusivity and belonging, but they enforce conformity instead. You can be gay, you can be black, you can be trans, you can be disabled, so long as your politics are progressive. If not, then your identity no longer protects you. You're now off-brand. And we've seen that all over social media with, we see trans people speaking up in support of Republicans, and people who are backlashing on them and saying, how can you be trans and support the conservatives or support the Republicans? Like, such an idea on its own is just so void of sanity that how dare they have an opinion? Because again, it comes down to, it's not about helping marginalized people. It's about controlling everybody's ideas. And once you understand that and see it and admit it, the whole system kind of makes sense, is what they're trying to do. So what happens when institutions chase the illusion of diversity while basically killing off the real thing? First, you get the echo chambers, where everybody thinks they're right because nobody is allowed to challenge them. And that's how bad ideas and bad policy survive. And that's how censorship becomes policy, because That's how people convince themselves that banning books, firing dissenters, or rigging algorithms is somehow moral because it helps their cause. Secondly, you're going to get groupthink. And when you get groupthink, you've just killed off all innovation. Because if anyone's scared to speak up, nobody's going to flag the flaws, no one questions the narrative, and no one actually proposes a better path forward. Nothing changes. We've seen this in real time. We saw it during COVID, we saw it on climate debates, we see it on social justice initiatives that all backfired and all could have benefited from some dissent up front. Instead, it was all labeled heresy. Third, and maybe most importantly, you lose all trust, and the public sees through the performative bullshit now. They hear the same slogans repeated from government to newsroom to boardroom, and they know that something's off. And we're starting to see that. As I talked about in episode 1, the mask slipped. When institutions only promote one side, people start looking elsewhere and fast. And that's why independent media, all of a sudden, independent media, outside voices, and dissident thinkers are on the rise. People are starving for honesty, not orthodoxy. Because when you look at a panel and you see 5 different skin tones, but not a single differing opinion, you don't see, and you're not getting diversity. You're seeing a carefully managed illusion. And illusions don't last. My take. Here's where I land, and I know I've ranted a little bit and I've gone off script a few of these points, and it may not come across as factual or make any sense. But I will say that diversity, to me, diversity that excludes thought isn't diversity at all. It's branding, it's camouflage, it's compliance, and it's corporate insurance and moral grandstanding disguised as progress. And I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous because if we aren't allowed to disagree with each other, then we can never improve. If we can't challenge each other, we can never grow. And if we can't tolerate uncomfortable truths, fierce conversations, and differences of opinion, we're living in a lie. The entire point of a free society is that the best ideas win, not because they're the loudest or the most popular at the moment, but because they survive and hold up under scrutiny. That only happens when all ideas, even the controversial ones, are allowed to be heard without punishment. And real progress comes from encouraging new ideas, not suppressing conflict, and it comes from engaging with it, with conflict, head on, honestly, and with courage and civility. It's time that people, all of us, stopped accepting surface level show of what we're told is diversity and started demanding the real thing. Diversity of thought, to me, is the foundation of democracy, and it is the engine of science, and it's at the core of art, and it is how civilizations have survived and thrived for centuries. Without it, all the identity boxes in the world won't save us. We're told diversity is our strength, but when diversity is used to silence disagreement, it becomes our weakness. Simple as that. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.